Course 6, Principles of Safeguarding and Protection. Aims and objectives are to understand what safeguarding means and who is a vulnerable person, to understand the different types of abuse, to have an understanding why individuals do not report abuse, to understand your role and responsibilities when an allegation is made or you suspect abuse is taking place, to understand how to preserve evidence of abuse, and to understand how you can minimise the risk of abuse. What does it mean? CQC states that safeguarding means protecting people's health, well-being and human rights and enabling them to live free from harm, abuse and neglect. It's fundamental to high-quality health and social care. NHS England states that a vulnerable person is defined as an adult at risk is any person who is ages 18 years or over and at risk of abuse or neglect because of their needs for care and or support. Different types of abuse. These are usually classified under 5 main headings: physical abuse, sexual abuse, psychological abuse, financial abuse, organisational or institutional abuse, self-neglect, neglect or acts of omission. We will now examine each category a bit closer. Physical abuse can include punching, hitting, slapping, restraint such as tying people to beds, refusal to allow them to use toilet facilities, deliberate starvation or forced feeding, leaving patients in wet or soiled clothing, excessive, inappropriate use of medication. Indicators of physical abuse could be bruising or finger marks, which are often on the inner arms or thighs, fractures, especially twisting fractures and dislocations, scratches or cuts, pressure sores from being left in wet clothing, black eyes or bruised ears, welt marks on the back of legs, back or buttocks, scalds or cigarette burns, history of unexplained falls or injuries, unexplained weight loss, mood changes. This can include patients withdrawing themselves, isolating themselves from groups, care workers' resistance to allow people to visit, and patients' reluctance to be alone with certain people. Sexual abuse can include sexual penetrations of any part of the body, touching inappropriate parts of the body without consent, sexual exploitation, exposure to or involvement in pornographic material, indecent exposure. Indicators of sexual abuse: pregnancy, blood or marks on underwear, recurrent genital or urinary infections, physical signs in genital area, which could include bruising or scratches, bruises, scratches, bite marks on the body, provocative sexual behaviour, sexual abuse of others, refusal to undress for swimming or bathing, self-injury or self-destructive behaviour including drug or alcohol abuse, running away from home. Psychological and emotional abuse can include emotional abuse, bullying, threats of harm or abandonment, ignoring, shouting, swearing, humiliation, blaming, controlling, deprivation of privacy or dignity. Indicators of psychological and emotional abuse could be carer appearing to ignore the vulnerable person's needs or presence, reports from others concerning their welfare, patients are fearful of particular individuals, reluctance of the individual to be alone with certain people, referring to the cared for person in a derogatory way, cared for person's opinions and wishes not being taken into account, basic human rights being ignored, privacy, dignity, choice, opinion, cared for person being humiliated through teasing or taunting. Financial abuse can include theft, fraud, exploitation, someone else putting pressure on them regarding their will, property, inheritance or financial issues, the misuse of their property by others, including money and benefits, but also their possessions. Indicators of financial abuse: someone not being allowed to manage their financial affairs, family unwilling to pay for services from the relative's funds, other people moving into the person's property, family regularly asking for money from personal allowance, very few or no personal possessions, unusual and unexplained change in spending habits, or a sudden change of a will. Organisations or institutional abuse can include people in residential settings have no choice over day-to-day decisions such as mealtimes or bedtimes. Freedom to go out is limited. Privacy and dignity are not respected. Letters and personal correspondence are opened by staff, and setting runs for the convenience of the staff. Neglect. Neglect can be by others and by the individuals themselves. Neglect is when a carer fails to support an individual's support needs, either through them not wanting to do it, them not realising its importance, or because they are unable to do it. Neglect can include not providing adequate food, not supporting them with required personal care, not ensuring they have appropriate clothing, not supporting someone with communication or mobility needs, failing to maintain a clean and hygienic living area, not supporting social contacts, failing to obtain medical help when necessary. In some settings, social care workers neglect individuals as they are not trained to carry out the activities, or the home is not providing the right equipment to do the job. Self-neglect. Self-neglect is when people neglect their own care. This can be due to a variety of reasons: increasing ill health, physical illness or disability, sensory or memory loss, mental illness, alcohol and drug misuse, learning difficulties. It's important to remember that in some cases, what may appear as self-neglect may be a lifestyle choice. You must be careful not to impose your own views about the way in which an individual chooses to live their lives just because it's different from your own lifestyle. For example, consider a weekly bath. Would this suit you? Indicators of neglect, self-neglect. Deteriorating medical condition unexpectedly. Hypothermia. Not being dressed appropriate for weather. Home living environment unhygienic. Individual has sores or rashes. Unexplained loss of weight. Clothing and or body appears dirty or smelly. Delays in seeking medical attention. But why do patients not report it? Many individuals do not report abuse due to they are too ill or frail. They do not understand what's happening. They've been threatened by the abuser that something will happen to them, or others if they tell. They do not think anyone will believe them. They are ashamed and they think it's their fault. It is your job as a care worker to recognise the signs and follow the procedures in your workplace to report your concerns immediately. How do you respond to allegations of abuse? Well, listen to what they are telling you. Do not ask leading questions, but allow the person to talk about what's happened. Never tell someone that you can keep it a secret, even if they ask you to. They may be telling you, so you'll do something about it, and is one of the few times when you can break their confidentiality by telling someone senior. Write a factual report on what you've been told, including times and dates. Report what you've been told immediately to a senior colleague. They will take responsibility for what happens next. So what is your role in cases of suspected or actual abuse? Your most important concern is the safety of the individual and that they are protected from any further abuse. Write a factual report including dates and times of the incident. Report any abusive situation to your line manager or most appropriate senior colleague. How can you preserve evidence? It is important to preserve any evidence as it could be a potential crime scene. Some examples are: do not wash or clean up any area of the room where the alleged abuse took place. Do not allow the person to bath, shower, clean teeth or brush hair. Do not remove bedding. Keep other people out of the room or area where the alleged abuse took place. If financial abuse is suspected, ensure documents and papers are kept to allow for investigation if necessary. How can you minimise the risk? Empower individuals by ensuring they have control over their own lives. Encourage them to make their own decisions about their care. Offer informed choices to make them feel valued. If individuals feel in control, they are more likely to report abusive situations. Ensure they have information about how to make complaints and support them to do this if necessary. Encourage staff to report any concerns they may have about care of individuals.